today I'm doing something really wacky. I'm doing an authentic medieval ale. What is this, Jay? What is this? Why? Why? I don't know. I can't help myself. I ran across this article written by I haven't been able to figure out his last name. Tofi Kurthjalfadsen. He made this stuff in 1998. He made 2 recipes based off a book from Judith Bennett, Ale, Beers, and Brewsters. And that was written, I think, in the mid-90s. The recipe that I'm going off the 2 is one from between 1333 and 1334. It's from the household of Elizabeth de Burgh, Lady of Clare. So he had another one in there where it was a little bit more weaker of an ale. This one's a little bit stronger. Let me point out, though, that, which was not mentioned in the article, that Judith Bennett's book, the full title is Ale, Brewers, and Brewsters, Woman's Work in a Changing World. And I'm going to read the synopsis from Amazon. I thought it was fascinating. Back then, women brewed and sold most of the ale consumed in medieval England. But after 1350, men slowly took over the trade. By 1600, most brewers in London were male, and men also dominated the trade in many towns and villages. This book asks how, when, and why brewing ceased to be women's work and instead became a job for men. Actually sounds like a really interesting read. I had heard that women were the main brewers back then, but that's interesting that there was like a history book written about it. It tells the evolution of that. So the main difference between ale and beer, especially in the 1600s, and going a little before, was ale was unhopped and beer was hopped, and that was the difference. Hops didn't really come around until the 15th century, so if you're going back in the 1300s, hops weren't really around anyway. They would sometimes spice it, but they didn't call it Groot, and this is not a Groot ale. So in fact, when it comes to spicing, in 1483, I'm going to quote, brewers persuaded authorities to state, no one should put any ale or liquor, whereof ale shall be made, or in working or brewing a manner of ale, or any hops, herbs, or other like, but only liquor, malt, and yeast. No hops. That's no hops. Now, a Groot is, or Gruit as some people call it, is a spiced beer ale, I should say, not beer, ale, from the Dutch region, I want to say like parts of Germany, Belgium, back in that same time period. It is not a Groot ale. They did not call it that in England at that time. I did some research on this. So I was like, oh, this is a Groot ale. Not only that, they didn't spice them that often, these beers in medieval England in particular. This is also largely a raw ale. Also, back in the day, in medieval times, it had to be served fresh because they didn't really have ways to keep it very long before it spoiled. No boil, no hops. That's a recipe for disaster when it comes to microbes getting in. So that they started quickly, even I was near the end of fermentation at times, because I just couldn't do it. Also, they need to sell it quickly, so they couldn't really have room or time frame to store it. So there was some evidence sometimes that people storing this for a long time and it turning out okay, but it had to be sour, or had to be off in some way, had to be some sort of Brettanomyces in this, is my guess. For this recipe, what he did, Tofi, is he ran off the first wort, and then did a second running and made like a smaller table beer, essentially. Party Guile, that's what that would be called, which is very common back then and very common for a while, actually, and still is practiced to this day. So I won't be doing a table beer or a second running. I'm just going to do the first running and collect that. 1 gallon is going to be, I'm going to help it into a sour. And I just want to see what it does. I might throw some bottle dregs into it, pitch commercial yeast or commercial bacteria. One is going to be authentic, though. 1 gallon of this I will ferment with regularly and call it a day and probably drink it fresh. I will store some for about 6 months to a year just to see if it changes at all, if it stales or anything happens. So, in honor of the times, I will not be using any instruments. No thermometer, no pH meter. Will not be adding any salts to this. It is what it is. So this is just my hands, some online references, and some hope. Let's get started. All right, first collecting some mash water here. I'm just gonna get this to a boil, and then add the boiling water into the mash. I know it sounds crazy, but you're gonna see, but there's a way to do this, apparently. I'm collecting 15 quarts of water. According to the article, 14 quarts can yield 1.5 gallons, 16 quarts gets you 2 gallons. So so I'm splitting that difference. Carbon filtering my water because they didn't have chlorine in their medieval water, I'm guessing. And the water was pretty hard back then, actually. My water is very hard here, so it should work out. So for the grain, you need a lot of it. Like, a lot. The recipe calls for 12.3 pounds of grain for just 2 gallons of wort. That's a lot. I think I normally do I think I'm looking at depending on the gravity, but I'm usually closer to 2 pounds of grain per gallon. So this is going to be a really thick mash. But the recipe calls for 8 pounds of pale malt, 1.3 pounds of roasted malt, I'll get to that in a second, and 3 pounds of oats rolled. I didn't do the rolled oats at the homebrew store, and I just got regular flaked oats. So according to the article, roasting some of the grain actually mimics some of the style of that time, especially with the unevenness of how they did it back then. I was very tempted to smoke this because that would really mimic how they would kiln the malts back then, or darken the grain, I should say. But I'm just going to do this in the oven. I'm going to do 30 minutes at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. Then after 30 minutes, raise it to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and do another 30 minutes. That, according to the article, said it should give me about an amber color on the beer. So we'll see. I got a shallow dish here, oven safe. That's about the depth and dimensions that is recommended. So let's get our grain out, shall we? It is definitely going to be hard to do this without any instruments, but I still want to take a couple readings just to see where I'm at. But if I don't care where it is, what the pH is at, how off it is, I'm going to roll with it. So the pH is at 7, I don't care. It is what it is. If I'm mashing it at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, it is what it is. I'm going to try and follow this as closely as I possibly can. He also recommended opening your mill a little bit on the gap. Macy's gift card. Normally, when I mill my grain, it's a really tight roll. The credit card barely fits in. I did it so it just slips right through. So I opened up the gap a little bit. He recommended that because it's so thick that it could get stuck. So that's what he recommended. I'm doing the same thing. So I have to crush 8 pounds of 2-row right now. And I don't have a drill to really do that right now, which sucks. So, and it's 95 degrees out right now, so it should be fun. Let's stir the grains around within themselves. Look how much there is. Oh yeah, we're raging now. We're raging. Okay, so the first step said just to cover the false bottom, and then you add your grain. So do that first. Pour the grain in. That's almost to the top. The next step is to pour over the boiling water into this, but do it from a height so it drives off a little bit of the heat as it goes in. And they said to ladle it. That was probably the best way because it's such hot water. Ah! I'm going to quote the article about stirring the mash. I want to get it right. There's this writer within the article named Digby, and he says it's going to be really thick. In addition, this other dude, William Harrison, described how his wife makes beer. writes, "The first liquor which is full, 80 gallons according to the proportion of our furnace. She maketh boiling hot, and then powereth in softly into the malt where it resteth, but without stirring, until her second liquor is almost ready to boil." So that's kind of the reason why this is done here, or why he did it too. So he tried boiling water over a height of 2 feet, a quarter of a time, and then in order to let enzymes have some chance to being cool in some places and too hot in others. He didn't stir up until half an hour after initially mashing in. Thought I'd really clarify that and really stress why I'm doing it. It stresses me out though, it really does. I'm gonna take a measurement right now and see how hot this is. So as you saw, that is hot. And we did see one from 180 to 176 and when I moved it over a little bit. I'd imagine near the bottom it's probably not that hot. But we'll find out when I stir it in about 30 minutes. At that time I will take a pH rating as I said. I'm just curious. Even if it's at like 7, I'm just going to leave it. It's a little unsettling, this whole thing so far. Ooh. Stir the mash in and see what the temp is. Wow. This is the thickest mash I've ever seen for 2 gallons. It's almost to the top. For the record, I do not have high hopes for this being anywhere closer I want it to be for temperature. I still think it's going to be too hot. It was a little unclear how fast you should put the boiling water into your mash. I did mine fairly quickly. I think if I were to do this again, which is doubtful, I would probably pour on, wait like a minute, couple minutes, pour more, wait a couple minutes, and slowly pour it on. I ladled it on fairly quickly. I think that's why it's so hot. But you know what? Back then, who knows? They could be mashing in 165 degrees Fahrenheit. They don't know. They're putting boiling water in and go, we're getting sugars out of it. I will say, touching it though, my hands are a little sticky, so something is happening. All right, let's take a pH reading. That's horrifying. Not where you want to be. Not at all. I'm gonna leave it though. So now I gotta let this go for 3.5 hours. That's what they said in the article. And I think the reason why they did this and why it's suggested in the article is because it was pretty hot, the mash. It was so thick that it just took a while to convert. So I'm not gonna wait 3.5 hours. I don't think I have that kind of patience. I will probably wait 3 though and start running off, because I imagine it'll probably be converted in an hour anyway, but to follow the tradition to some extent, or as much as I possibly can, I'll go as long as I possibly can wait. All right, now we wait. It's been 3 hours. Made it. Time to run off. Before I do though, I do want to say there was no recirculation from what was gathered about how they brewed back then. So I'm going to run right off to my fermenters, which are sanitized. It's crazy. I've never had to run off a beer directly into a fermenter. Feels a little weird, but kind of like it. 3-hour mash started at, what was it, like 168, something like that? See where we were at now after 3 hours. Now a little over 3 hours. Hey, we hit mash temps. All right. Okay, I'm going to just run this off in the first fermenter, collect a gallon, and do the other one. I will also be taking a gravity reading. I'm just curious. I don't care what it is. In the article, he got, I think, 1090 on average. He did it a couple times, too. So if I get anywhere near that, that'll be okay. I expect it'll get less. My main concern is how tannic this is going to be with how high the pH was and how high the mash was. Good times ahead. I'm very concerned about a stuck mash right now. This is so gooey and gunky. I understand now why you wanted to or recommended the rollers of your mill to be opened a little bit. Oh. It's so gunky. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, we're in business. This is one slow runoff. It's basically stuck. Wait, there's a little bit coming out. I have to keep stirring the mash actually to keep it coming out. Okay, 1 gallon collected. Look at that. Just a soupy mess. I don't know how they got this out in the medieval ages. I don't know. I think this might be better suited for a brew in a bag. You could just lift it up and let it drain out. That would be a better way to go because this is going to take forever. Got 1 gallon though. Now for a gallon number 2. I do not know how this guy got 2 gallons out of this. That's all I've collected so far in like a half hour, my 2nd gallon. It's just so gummy. I thought about adding rice hulls to this, but they didn't have that back then, or they didn't use it. That's what it seemed like, so I want to be authentic. There's no way I can use this. The only option I have is to heat up some more water and thin this out, and then actually run it off and do like a second 1 gallon jug of this, which I'm gonna do. I don't have any option right now because this isn't happening. Yeah, I'm gonna heat up, I think, like 2 more gallons of water. I think he said 6 to 8 quarts for a second runoff. Maybe I'll do like a gallon and a half of water and heat it up, not to boil. I'm just gonna eyeball when it starts to get a little hot, pour it back in, and I just essentially want to just collect another gallon. That's my goal here. All right, well that's heating up. Let's take a gravity reading of what we got in the first runoff, shall we? 1.100. It's very hefty. That's like barley wine range with no hops in it. This is gonna turn out horrible, is my guess. All right, that's much thinner. All right, hopefully this does it. Oh, much better for runoff. That was flowing nicely. So this is the part that worries me the most. You just run this off, you put it into a container, and you let it sit overnight, and then pitch the yeast. There was a reference where someone did this for 40 hours, then they pitched the yeast. Another reference was someone did it in an open vat, cooled it down that way, and then pitched their yeast. That you're probably getting into sour stuff. It's very similar to lambic beer by putting it into like a shallow vat. Tofi did it in a way where he just did it overnight and pitched the yeast. I'll do the same thing. And pray there's no wild fermentation or something doesn't get in overnight. And if it does, I'll go with it. Look how murky this one is compared to this one. This one is 1057. So a lot lower in alcohol. So this would be good for a sour anyway. Let's wait overnight. I'm going to put this in a chest in this freezer here. Set the temperature to like 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the morning, pitch the yeast. And let's go to the morning now. All right, next day. Look at the difference on how much gunk's in that as opposed to this. So this is the stronger one. The article said to boil a cup of water and then sprinkle Nottingham yeast into it. Then 2/3 goes into the strong one, and that was for 2 gallons for him. And 1/3 of it goes into his runoff that he did. I will not be doing that. I'll do half a cup and split between these two. A little more going to the 1100 one. Well, quite a bit more, I should say. So it's my half a cup. Feels cool to the touch. I have about half a packet here, maybe a little more. Feels about half a pack. All right, let it bloom for a second. All right, I'll let it bloom. Stir it in, or a little swirl, I should say. So this will get 2/3, I think, of whatever this is. Half a cup. All right, well, there you have it. They didn't have aeration, oxygen tanks back then, so I just got to swirl and hope for the best. This one I'm more worried about because of how strong the gravity is. Okay, well, there you go. To give this a good 45 seconds to a minute of shaking. Hope for the best. See you at the tasting video, and good luck to me for the rest of the way. And thank you for watching.